Some of the world's creepiest castles have centuries-old history within their walls. When it comes to creepy and mysterious places, few locations can top a castle. With their eerie towers, secret passages, hidden chambers, and sprawling grounds, not to mention the knowledge that there have been numerous murders, disappearances, and unmentionable atrocities committed in them over the centuries, it's no wonder stories involving these places are enough to give anyone goosebumps. Throughout history, many castles have been built with sinister intentions. Despite their original purposes, many of these imposing structures now stand abandoned and derelict, serving as perfect settings for spooky legends and chilling tales. These old and abandoned castles are not just dilapidated structures, but also remarkable remnants of the past. There are many castles that people claim to be the most terrifying, with visitors reporting creepy sounds and spooky sightings. However, the stories associated with these castles make it hard not to be convinced that something spooky is going on. Continue on to discover more about the world's 5 creepiest castles. The Tower of London has a long and dark history and is often called England's most secure castle. Even today, the castle is still guarded by armed soldiers and is only open to the public during certain hours. This castle has been the home to several kings, queens, crown jewels, royal mint, and numerous prisoners for centuries. As a result, the walls of this castle are stained with the history of countless tragedies and hundreds of innocent people's blood. Over the years, the Tower of London has been the site of many executions, murders, and other dark events. Many ghosts haunt the castle grounds from centuries past, and Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII and the first wife he executed, is the most famous and persistent of all tower ghosts. She is said to haunt Tower Green, where she was executed, St. Peter ad Vincula, where she was buried, and various corridors as a headless body. Although Henry VI stood to inherit both the English and French thrones, the House of York imprisoned him during the War of the Roses. Edward IV seized the throne in 1471, and shortly after, Henry VI was stabbed while praying in Wakefield Tower. His ghost is said to haunt the tower to this day and appears at the last stroke of midnight. No creepy castle ghost story would be complete without a White Lady. No one is sure who the White Lady is, but she is said to haunt the White Tower. Her presence is announced by an overwhelming smell of cheap perfume, the scent so strong it has made several tower visitors sick. Some visitors report being tapped on the shoulder, only to turn around and see nothing but a white wisp in the air. Ghosts of children also haunt the Tower of London. Figures of 2 little boys wearing nightshirts appearing lost and holding hands are often seen in the White Tower. They have also been seen playing on the battlements, and some visitors claim to hear the laughter of small children. The ghosts are thought to be Princes Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, who were locked up in the Tower of London by their uncle, Richard. He ordered their murders sometime around 1483 because they had more rights to the throne than he did. The bones of 2 small boys were discovered in 1674 under a set of stairs in the castle. Once the bones were found, they were given a royal burial at Westminster Abbey. Human spirits aren't the only ones that haunt the castle grounds. Visitors to the castle have heard spectral animals over the years, including lions, horses, and monkeys. Still, only one type of animal has been seen. There was an occasion when a guard saw a bear charging at him. Trying to defend himself, he swung his sword, but the blade went through the bear. After the incident, the guard was taken to his quarters, where he died 2 days later from reportedly going insane. Throughout Scotland's history, Edinburgh Castle has been the most besieged castle in the country. It has stood as the Scottish equivalent to the Tower of London, which has housed the country's crown jewels, served as a prison and barracks, and protected the royal family during times of unrest. Edinburgh Castle is known as one of the oldest castles in Europe. The castle is also well known as the most haunted place in Scotland. Several staff members and visitors have experienced paranormal activities and feel a ghostly presence inside the castle. The feeling of something tugging at your clothes, an unseen presence touching your face, and seeing shadowy figures are all experiences that have occurred within the castle walls. Drops in temperature and burning sensations on the skin have also been reported. Several hundred years ago, secret tunnels were discovered near the castle along the Royal Mile leading towards Holyrood Palace. A bagpiper was sent to explore them to figure out where they led. He was to walk along the tunnel playing the bagpipes so others would know where he was. About halfway to the palace, the sound of the bagpipes stopped. A rescue team soon entered the tunnel to find the bagpiper, but discovered that he had disappeared. Soon after, the tunnels were resealed, but on quiet days the faint sound of bagpipes can still be heard below the Royal Mile between the palace and castle. Another ghostly instrument has been heard by visitors to the castle. The faint sounds of drums can be heard on occasion, without the appearance of the headless drummer in centuries. Legend is that the appearance of the drummer was seen as an omen of an impending attack on the castle. This belief was bolstered by an actual event in 1650 when Oliver Cromwell's army laid siege to the castle after the ghostly drummer was seen. One of the most tragic stories of Edinburgh Castle involves a woman named Janet Douglas, who is known as the Grey Lady. In 1537, Janet was accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in front of her son outside the castle by order of King James V. Her spirit has been haunting the castle ever since. Sometimes she is seen wandering around the older parts of the castle, while other times she has been witnessed crying. Hammering sounds have been heard outside the castle, thought to be the sounds of construction workers building the scaffolding where Janet was burned alive. There have been reports of strange shadows and glowing orbs in the castle dungeons, where it is believed that Janet's servants, prisoners of war, and enemies of war were tortured and left to die. Dunluce Castle was built around 1500 and sits on the edge of a cliff on the North Antrim coast. Surrounded by steep drops on either side of the castle, Dunluce Castle was abandoned in 1639, while the surrounding city was razed in 1641. As a result, ruins stand today where the majestic castle once stood. Dunluce Castle might look familiar to Game of Thrones fans. It served as the filming location for Castle Greyjoy. But like the Greyjoy story, the castle's history is full of tragedy. The castle was used as a fort once Vikings sailed into Northern Ireland and had a violent and turbulent history until it was abandoned. Although the castle was abandoned by living souls, many mysterious hauntings have occurred through the centuries. Former inhabitants of the castle are still lingering to this day. The earliest owners of the castle were the Macquillans in 1513, and this is where the tragedy begins. Lord Macquillan arranged a marriage for his only daughter Maeve, but she was in love with another man. Maeve refused to marry the man her father chose, and in turn, he locked her in one of the castle turrets. Maeve waited for her true love to return from sea to rescue her, and he did on one stormy, turbulent night. The young lovers escaped on a small rowboat in the tumultuous, choppy waters, but sadly perished in the storm. Some say that you can hear Maeve's spirit crying in the northeast tower of Dunluce Castle on stormy nights. Supposedly, she's still lamenting her lost love and imprisoned once again. One of the most notable tragedies of Dunluce Castle is when part of the kitchen fell to the sea below after a violent storm in the 17th century. Many servants and cooks fell to their watery graves when preparing for a large banquet. Some say you can still hear their cries on nights when the sea is rough and the wind is high. Despite the many sightings on castle grounds, no one has sensed malicious intent with these spirits. The Himeji Castle in Japan is the country's biggest and most revered castle, with 83 buildings and a maze to confuse invaders. Built between 1333 and 1346, the castle has a dark and strange history, making it one of the creepiest castles in the world. The design of Himeji Castle is said to have mythical powers that protect the castle structurally and magically. Kawara tiles shaped like ogres were used on the facade and main tower because the Japanese believed these tiles would repel evil spirits and keep the castle occupants free from harm. One occupant protected by the Kawara tiles was a servant named Okiku. There are many variations of her story, but the most popular version is that she was charged to look after 10 golden plates that belonged to the castle's mistress. Okiku's master, her mistress's husband, came on to her, but she refused his advances. The master didn't like this, so he stole one of the golden plates and told Okiku he would blame her for the missing plate and have her tortured and executed if she didn't submit to him. Okiku stood fast and decided the better choice was to jump into the castle courtyard well, drowning herself. After her death, Okiku's ghost would appear as a yurimi, a spirit of someone who died suddenly, characterized by black hair, wearing a white dress, and missing hands and feet. Okiku's yurimi would climb out of the well, walk into the mansion of plates, and check on the plates. The ghost would count the plates and, upon reaching 9 and not finding 10, would wail unnaturally. Legend has it that Okilu's yurimi drove her master insane, and her voice can still be heard counting plates from the well. Situated on Dartmoor, the buried Pomeroy Castle is rumored to be England's most haunted castle. Built in the late 15th century, the castle is home to many ghosts. One of the most famous ghosts of Pomeroy Castle is former inhabitant Margaret Pomeroy, also known as the White Lady. Margaret and her sister Eleanor were in love with the same man. Eleanor was jealous and had Margaret locked up in the castle dungeon, starving her to death. Margaret's ghost appears in St. Margaret's Tower, and seeing her is a precursor to immediate death. People who see her report having severe depression, anger, and fear. Another ghost of Pomeroy Castle known as the Blue Lady dates back to the 1790s and involves a physician who cared for an ill resident of the castle. Dr. Farquhar recalled meeting the Blue Lady once when treating his patient, and his patient dying soon after. The Blue Lady's true identity is unknown, but she was said to give birth to her father's child. She couldn't live with the act of incest and murdered her child as a result. She is said to haunt the castle's corridors, mourning the loss of her child. Seeing her, like the White Lady, also means death is imminent.